Ready for C.
Shield! Shield!
Frag out!
Not good.
Watch out!
Not good.
Quick, take cover!
Hey everyone, this is David Jagno from UploadVR, and I'm joined by two members of the development team at InXile to talk about a new VR game that they're working on. It's going to be a new shooter that's coming very soon, and we're going to be getting some first details on the game here straight from the developers at InXile. So why don't you guys go ahead and introduce yourselves and start by telling us a little bit about the game.
Yeah, so I'll introduce myself first. I'm Brian Fargo. I'm the studio head here at InXile, and I'll jump into detail of the title in a moment. I'll let Pete do his introduction.
Cool. My name is Pete Mayberry. I am the lead designer for Frostpoint VR.
Yeah, so where would you like to start? I know that you had a kind of an initial question to kick it off. Would you like me to kind of start with that and start talking about it?
Yeah. Let's just get kind of the elevator pitch going a little bit about this, what the high level summary of the game is, and I'll reserve kind of my more detailed questions for later on because I know that from whenever I first saw the game a while ago, it's undergone a lot of changes. So let's definitely kind of start from the top and work our way down into the details for sure.
Sure. Well, it might be interesting to talk about kind of the genesis for how how it began and how we ended up here. First I've been anybody that's followed me has known I've been a big fan of VR since the beginning. I've some of the most fun I've had playing games in years have been in VR, whether it was Arizona Sunshine or Servio's title I had a great time with, or even our own Mage's Tale. Times where I remember one time I was playing VR. I was playing, and when I took off the headset, it was dark outside, and all the lights off were in the house, and it was this like creepy moment. But so I liked the medium. It's an interesting medium to me that you could sort of look into the room to see what was happening. So sort of a palette of things to choose from. From an immersive perspective, hard to beat. You're right there. And so we wanted to do another title after Mage's Tale, and so that was kind of part of the background. I guess the other part was that one of the things that I found fascinating sort of during the time was watching a lot of the kind of the emergent gameplay systems, so whether it was Rust or DayZ and those types of things, and seeing the videos that people were putting out of them having this incredible time that wasn't based upon scripted events. Right, and I liked that aspect to it. I've always done post-apocalyptic games, and they're always about how would the worst of the worst behave in these situations where there were no rules. Well, how would they behave? Well, watching a lot of those videos, you got to see how they would behave. So I got kind of it was like emulating a post-apoc world, and a mean one at that, in a way. And so I thought that was super entertaining. That what could we do to that and then bring VR to it? I became friends with Brian Hicks along the way, and we started also sort of sharing our notes of things that we like to do. And Brian Hicks, he is one of the lead designers, the creative director of DayZ. He came aboard some years ago. He said, let's experiment with the medium, because he knows everything about survival, server, and guns. I mean, that's his thing. And so we started working on a product that originally was going to be more of a survival game. And so we were working on those three aspects. But as we watched people play more and more and more, where we heard the shouting and yelling and screaming, and the fun part was always in those aspects to it. So we really kind of leaned in more into the combat side of it. And Brian was great because, one of the things that the users of this love is they want the guns to feel right, and they want them to feel right in VR. And there was a lot of technical challenges to pull off a game of this kind of scope that would look good and everything else. And so, and then that again, and getting the servers to run smoothly was a big part of the experience. Had to be great. So that's really how we got here and how we distilled it down to what we have here today.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting challenge because I feel like for a lot of non-VR games, There are a lot of things that are kind of taken for granted, at least from a player perspective. They don't pay a lot of attention to. If a gun isn't animated exactly correctly, or if it's not a believable way to reload, pressing a button isn't that big of a deal. But, in VR, there are so many games out there that have you physically, reloading the gun and, doing all the different movements, and it has to feel and look so realistic for it to really immerse the player. And, so going back to what you said about those shooting mechanics feeling right, that's such a big deal. And for you guys, I think most people in the VR space, at least, know you from Mage's Tale and, historically Bard's Tale, and then the Wasteland games, which are more top-down perspective. So a first-person shooter is a bit of a departure for you guys, isn't it?
Well, I guess I would argue that Mage's Tale was kind of a first-person shooter. That's really where we cut our teeth in VR, was on Mage's Tale. So granted, you were throwing your projectile weapons, but at the end of the day, you were running around in a first-person mode and you were attacking in that way. So Mage's Tale actually started off being a turn-based game. That pivoted to that, and then everything we learned from Mage's Tale, we wanted to apply some of the things we've learned to a game where they had multiple people playing it. So I think, yes, a departure from Wasteland, but not so much from Mage's Tale. And even Bard's Tale 4 was first person, though not action oriented, but we brought the camera down.
Cool. And so going back to what we alluded to earlier, where I saw an early build of this game around a year ago. Back then it was sort of a battle royale meets, light survival meets, PvP shooter. So I guess how accurate is that description now? And from just a high level, what is the game? It is a post-apocalyptic shooter, kind of a frozen tundra setting. But what exactly is it?
Frostpoint VR is a 20-player PvP combat. A player joins in on their in-game main menu. They quickly matchmake into a game. From there, they're separated into two teams. They're loaded into their team's bunker area, where along the wall you have your choice of weapons, tools, armor, different armors with inherent abilities, all sorts of cool gadgets. And then you equip and then head out into conflict. So really leaning heavily into the PvP aspect of the game. But there's also a secondary layer of a PvP or PvE element right now. So while you're fighting the other team, you have this constant threat of these biomechanical creatures coming out from every direction. And so you'll be fighting against the enemy team and then turn the corner and then you're faced with these hulking creatures. And so it's great dynamic to deal with those things and then deal with the other team and then kind of try to win the day against these two forces. And so you fight it out. We have right now multiple game modes, and so you join in, let's say, domination mode, and so the winning team is the one that can control the points the longest for the most amount to get the points, and it's easy like that. We also have just straight up team deathmatch, and so if you just want to run out into the world and kill each other, you're allowed to do that.
Are those creatures, are the environmental factors, are they present in every mode?
They are, and they're worked into the game as not only an opposing force, but a resource and something that you actively search out depending on the game mode. And so, it's interwoven into each game mode.
Okay, this isn't a VR game, but I don't know if you're familiar with the Gambit from Destiny 2. That's kind of a PvPvE game mode as well. And I'm seeing stuff like that pop up these days, and so it seems like a popular sort of trend. And it's interesting because usually those two things are very separate in online games, and so seeing them blend together is it's really interesting to see.
It does add a very cool dynamic to the battles. Because it's this always thing that you always have to kind of, it's maybe not in the forefront, but it's always on the side, slowly creeping in as I show.
Can you go over some of the types of weapons that are in the game that players can choose from, and how do they, is there loot that they acquire while they're out fighting? How customizable are the guns? That kind of stuff.
So we have a suite of realistic weapons. All have attachments like PEC2 scopes, secondhand grips. We also have a suite of sci-fi weapons that are really, really interesting to play and change the dynamic of the game. As far as going out and finding loot, there will be locations where these upgrades will happen, and so they almost become hot points of contention between the two teams. So they're out in the world. There is guns available, but I'd be very wary going to get them.
Cool. And is it like a class-based game? Do players have different loadouts, or how does that work exactly?
It's free form. There are tools that lean towards kind of more defensive, offensive support. And so you as a player, your class is based on what tools you're grabbing from the wall and paying in-game currency.
And I would say the suits adds to this also, wouldn't you, Pete?
Yeah, the suits add a certain level of classiness, or class-like. So you'll have suits that allow the player to run faster, have better protection, cut down on gun recoil, and so there's certain things that change. So if you want to be a heavy, you have the ability to be a heavy. If you want to be a scout, you can be. If you want to be a pure support, you can be.
Got it. That's interesting. So I guess, well, one question I have is, from the way you described the game, it definitely sounds like something that will, I would say, fulfill a bit of a void in the VR space. There's not really a game like this out there. But that makes me wonder as well, what about this game felt like a great fit for VR to you guys? Because it sounds like, you wanted to make another VR game and then you iterated into this idea, but what about this particular game feels like it needs VR to be what you want it to be?
Well, let's see. Again, it was very much a byproduct of watching people actually play it and what they were really loving. And we would bring in, you came in a long time ago, and we brought some of our international partners in, and we couldn't get them out of the headset for 45 minutes. And so we got to watch what people really gravitated towards, and it was more of a kind of a battlefield type experience. So where the VR comes in is as you know, there's no sensation like it. So you're having to it's anything from tossing weapons to your friend when they're down, or throwing heal grenades at them. Right, there's a stickiness to the world that you're actually there, and keeping eye on things in sort of 360-degree field, which completely changes the experience that people are used to with that kind of thing. It's really, I mean, it is a sort of it's like Battlefield is the closest comparison that I would give, or the kind of the Call of Duty military shooters. But at least when we started, and now when we look at what's been done subsequently, you see titles like Pavlov and Onward, sort of scratching a similar itch. We think this audience will like this title, and even in some way what Boneworks did, which is to really show physically, when you're doing weapons correctly, how rewarding that is when it's done right. Of course, our trick was, it's a whole different conversation when you're doing it in a world where you're by yourself versus 19 other people running around. You got to see what they're doing. And that was a supreme technical challenge. It was probably one of the most technically challenging things we've ever done in the company. I mean, it really took a lot of effort to make it work correctly and look good at the same time. That's one of the, I think they did a super job with the visual aspect of it. It looks good just for a VR game, period. And then when we tell people it's 20 people, it's even more impressive.
Awesome. I guess one other, because we've talked about other franchises and games that have inspired, that have inspired this one, and I was kind of struck at the beginning that some of your favorite VR games that you listed off, you listed off several before you even got to your own. So that, to me, that speaks volumes to the fact that you're, someone that's actually aware of the industry and has played these games. And so what are some of the main ones that have inspired the development of this one?
Gosh, when the Oculus came out, I think I played every single thing that ever came out. Every single week, I bought everything, I played everything. And so, I mean, Arizona Sunshine was some of the most fun I had, like I said, in many, many years. I played the Survios title. Maybe it was called. I can't remember the one, the fighting game that they had.
Raw Data.
Raw Data. That's it. Raw Data. I enjoyed Gorn. I thought it was ridiculous fun. Again, I'm into our title. I genuinely did enjoy our title. I don't always, get to experience them. I did. I enjoyed Lone Echo. What I could play of that. I could only go so far in these things, and on the smooth movement category. I mean, those are some of my Pete. If you want some of your VR, I know you put a lot of time into some of the competitive titles.
Yeah, so me and the rest of the team, we would always play the Onward, Pavlov, Contractors, Zero Caliber when it came out. I'm actually just playing Fallout 4 VR just because I want to spend the next year and a half in a VR set to finish it. So yeah, a lot of the combat games we've looked at specifically. So because since we're gonna kind of enter in that field, we had to know what everyone else was doing and made sure that ours stood apart and was interesting.
Okay, I think that's a great segue point. I guess if you had to list off the main ways that it is, interesting and differentiated from those, what do you think those would be?
Definitely the layer of the PvP PvE element is very interesting, very cool. Changes the dynamic of the battlefield greatly as you're playing. Something that I've said multiple times to multiple people. Our artists on our team did a fantastic job. Our game looks really nice for a VR game. For a non-VR game, it looks beautiful. We do layer in that light sci-fi element, so we can introduce things that are less than realistic. Like Brian said before, healing grenades and energy shields and perchable turrets and other really cool things, and energy weapons. Like I've said it before, energy weapons are a blast to use. Sorry for the phrasing, but they're really entertaining to use. Those are definitely going to set us apart from the rest.
Cool. Are there any vehicles?
No vehicles.
Okay. I was imagining driving some type of hovercraft or something after you talked about energy weapons.
Yeah, no, there's so much that just the simple things that we're in combat and I'm throwing you a weapon, seeing the arms fly. We also fully support the index, so I can't imagine what people are going to do with their fingers.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, because I think back whenever I saw the game originally, I don't think the index was even out yet.
No.
So yeah.
No. We knew it was critical to fully support the index with this game, so we've done so.
For sure.
So yeah, so you're seeing the other players' fingers moving around the field, and there's
That's
so
awesome.
much data to keep track of. I mean, so to get a game with that many people, we're rendering 60 frames a second in both eyes, and keeping a nice consistent connection. It was that has been the big challenge. I mean, it really has been. It's no small feat.
Oh yeah, I can only imagine. I mean, it's rare to have a VR game with that many players, and so I guess the big question is, how do you think the player population will be? How healthy and how how difficult will it be to fill lobbies? Does it require 20, or can you play with less? How does that work?
Yeah, so I mean, the first part of that is make a really fun game that people want to return to. You know, that's got to be number one. And so obviously that's the big focus. We have set it up so that you could go play it and enjoy it by yourself. You know, so having the environmental enemies adds an element to it, to where you and a couple of friends can still have a good time with it. So we knew that was important. You know, in addition to bots and anything else, it's got to be robust enough to where a small audience can enjoy it. But one of the things what we're doing that is also, I think, kind of unique is we're doing we call it play to own campaign, or I guess a kind of a campaign, where we're going to seed the base. So the first, I'll say 10,000 people that meet a certain criteria playing the game, we'll figure out what that is later. It might be number of matches, number of hours, whatever it's going to be. We're going to just give them a free copy of the game, so that, you know, to sort of recognize that they've, you know, put all this effort in to help us make a better game, which is awesome. But they're also going to get free copies. So, and hopefully what that'll do is we'll have 10,000 people out there who played it, put hours in, enjoyed it, and now there's a player base from day one.
People that have tested it already. Is that what you're saying? Past testing, or you're giving an extra copy they can give to someone else? Is that what you're saying?
No, they won't have to purchase it. So rather, if they meet a certain criteria, which, like I said, we don't know what it's going to be yet. It could be hours. You put in X hours, you get a free copy of the game. You know, up to the first 10,000 people. Got
it. Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. And there was something you mentioned. You said that there will be bot support. Is that going to be there at launch?
I believe so, Pete.
Yep. That was something that was really important for us to have in, and so those will be in on release.
Oh, awesome! Yeah, that's great.
I know that the team's sense was that for some of those other games, what's helped prop them up during slow times is having bots in them. So, you know, they felt that was very important. So between the bot support and then the enemy AI support, between the two of them, there'll always be something to do.
What is the progression system like? Are there things that you unlock after playing for a while from an account level, or is it all per game progression, where you mentioned currency that you can spend on things during the matches, but is there anything outside of that for like a meta game progression system at all, or anything like that?
We are actively looking into that, a progression system outside of the game. We call it prestige system. And so, yes, we are actively looking into fleshing out a player's experience with rewards as they go through.
Okay. And I think the last time that I talked to you guys about this game, it was that there was a lot of thought that went into the narrative and the setting and all that kind of stuff. Are there still elements of that here, or is it? I know you guys mentioned honing in on the PvP competitive aspect, but are there still narrative implications or lore to find, anything like that?
Yeah, I would say the narrative elements are pretty light now. You know, again, what I found interesting about this is we typically, with our other games, we make them, we ship them, and then we're really done at that point unless we do DLC. And I thought it would be fun to be creating a world we were adding on things all the time. And so we actually have some really deep stuff written that would tell a story over multiple years. And so the idea is, assuming there is success, that we continue building upon this world. And there's tons of lore ready to go, but we wanted to nail the core systems. Unless the game's fun, they're not going to care about the lore. So we wanted to get those parts done first, and then that would be something we would layer on later.
Well, yeah, so that's an interesting way of doing a kind of living online world sort of style without having it necessarily needing to be like a persistent MMO, but you still get the narrative, payoff by doing it that way. Right.
Yeah, we didn't want. Yeah, it was never going to be a solve a quest, right? It was never going to be like that. But the idea of discovering what's going on underneath this whole thing and having we have other areas specced out that are wildly different and bizarre, And there is, like I said, there's a very deep world behind it. So to sort of reveal that in other ways, I found interesting.
Cool. And obviously you guys have been playing your own game for a while now and testing it and iterating and developing it all this time. Do either of you have any like highlight moments that stick out in your mind? I know Brian, you talked about that emergent gameplay that you were inspired by from the likes of DayZ and Rust and all that. What are some examples of ways that manifests in this game?
Yeah, Pete, Pete and the team, they've been putting in the most hours on this recently. So they're best equipped to answer that one. Pete would.
Yeah. So while we play, there's always those moments like when Brian Hicks used to like hide along the ridge and he would become the hunter for the rest of the team and be so antagonistic, and that the entire rest of the team would be hunting him in return. There's all the other moments where our lead manager he always seems to leave the base without a gun or lose his gun. And so he'll get into the thick of the battle and be screaming for other people to throw a gun, and someone will throw them their secondary. And I'm pretty sure he dies anyway, but just that moment was interesting enough. So there's always, it's funny about our office, our old office, was we were all really close, and the yelling and the screaming, and other developers would be trying to get some work done, and we'd be having a ball with our VR sets on, yelling, screaming, cursing each other's name. It was apparent that those are the moments that we really needed to focus on, because that was where the joy was coming from. Those fights, those combat moments.
It was always these guys. First, when you're developing VR games, everybody has to have a lot more space around their desk than is normal. And so it's like we look like a video game company with this group. You'd walk in, they've got all the space around them, and their hands are going like this, like they're doing the YMCA, and they're shouting and they're yelling. And so any person that came in the office would just look around and go, okay, this is like what we expect a video game company to be looking like. They're all geared up with their headsets. It was always funny watching these guys play.
I'm definitely looking forward to it. I play a lot of the same games that you mentioned as well, Pete. I'm really looking forward to Onward on Quest coming out in just a couple of weeks. I think having that on a wireless standalone headset is going to be great. And so I guess to that point, what are the platforms you're targeting for this game, and the release window, all that good stuff?
Yeah, so it's going to be on the Oculus and on the Rift, though. We have no plans for the Quest at the moment. Again, just sort of nailing this first big sort of AAA experience first, and then supporting the Vive, including the Index, which we talked about. It'll be before the end of the year. We don't know the exact month yet. We want to get more feedback from our. We're going to have an open beta coming up in September, and so we want to get that feedback and make sure we address what makes sense. And then pricing, and we haven't agreed on the pricing yet, so it'll be competitively priced, but I don't have it down to the dollar yet.
Awesome. I'm like I said, really excited to learn more and dig in myself. And is there anything else that either of you guys want to add about the game before I let you guys go?
Let me see. I'm just checking my notes, and no, I think we really hit the main thing. I think you'll appreciate it when you get in there. If you played a lot of products in VR, so you'll appreciate it more than most, I think, because again, it's very hard to have something look pretty and play smoothly with 20 people in VR. I just can't stress that enough. And so I think when you get in there, you'll appreciate the work that went into all of that and making the guns feel good that we knew would be critical to the players. So
that really actually does bring up a question that I forgot is, do you guys have scopes on any of your guns? I know that's hard to do in an online multiplayer VR shooter.
Yes, we do have scopes,
okay.
And yes, it is hard.
Yeah, I've heard from several developers that I've asked before. They're like, I mean, we have to render, the game multiple times on a scope, so we're just not doing that.
Yep.
And it's the little things like not having people skate all over the place, right? So it feels good. There's a lot that people just take for granted because they've played a lot of versions of this in 2D on the 2D monitor that just is very difficult to do in VR.
Thank you guys very much for taking the time to chat with me here and telling us about your game. And I look forward to seeing the community response and seeing what everyone thinks. And the open beta in September is not too far away. That's only a couple months, so it won't be too long before people can jump in.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, David.
Thanks, David.